Thank you all for being here. Okay. The Old Courtesan by Auguste Rodin is not really a work that you would like to have in your house. When it was first displayed in public, everybody shrank back in disgust. It pictures an old woman who is mourning her loss of youth. She was once young and beautiful, but now her withered skin covers her raggedy bones, and she is revolted by her own figure. Is there any beauty to be found in this piece? Certainly, if there is any, it's neither external nor immediately obvious. But the Bible offers us a deeper conception of artistic beauty. In fact, if we know what to look for, we can find beauty in art pieces that we wouldn't consider to be beautiful. The Bible discusses beauty in many different ways. It describes Old Testament figures like Sarah and Esther as beautiful in appearance. And it conflates the good and the beautiful when God calls his creation very good, and when Paul says, "Beautiful are the feet of him who brings good news." But most importantly, the Bible discusses beauty as a characteristic of God himself. Isaiah says, "Beauty and strength are in God's sanctuary," and the Psalms say, "That I may gaze upon the beauty of the Lord." Again and again, glory, splendor, majesty, and light are used to refer to God. If beauty is a characteristic of God, then anything that we see here on earth that is good or beautiful should lead us back to God, because he's the originator of all beauty. So, if beauty is in the eye of the beholder, then this piece is clearly ugly. But beauty is not in the eye of the beholder, at least not just in the eye of the beholder. If we believe that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, we are buying into a purely subjective belief system about beauty. Essentially, what we're saying is that the only reason something is beautiful is because we believe it to be so, because it fits within our aesthetic opinion or taste. But beauty has objectivity underneath that. Taste exists, and it makes our experience of beauty more intimate. But there is partial objectivity that can be defined. Is a sunset or a bouquet of roses only beautiful because it fits within our aesthetic taste? Surely not. There's something deeper within. Just as in music, how a perfect fifth is objectively beautiful, and how harmonies are objectively beautiful, art too has some measure of aesthetic objectivity. Now, I'm not the first person to propose objective beauty by any stretch. In fact, before the Enlightenment, famous philosophers and thinkers have also believed that beauty had objective characteristics. Plato, Augustine, and Aquinas all believed that beauty had objectivity. In fact, it was the common belief before the Enlightenment that beauty had objectivity. These three philosophers named harmony as one of the examples of a characteristic of beauty. But during and after the Enlightenment, the beliefs about beauty shifted into subjective conceptions. Immanuel Kant, one of the proponents of the Enlightenment, was credited with saying, "All appraisals of beauty are judgments of taste." Modernly translated, this is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And that's what most people initially believe today. So what are the criteria for judging art? How can we find beauty in art, and can we even judge art? I will discuss 5 criteria that are found in the Bible today. The first 3 characteristics of beautiful art are found in Genesis in the creation narrative. The 4th characteristic is found when we look at how the tabernacle and the temple are described. And the 5th has to do with a moral aspect to what is beautiful. If a piece of art has the qualities of God's creation, it is much more likely to spark the same sense of wonder, awe, and closeness with God that his creation causes us to find. So first we're going to look at creativity. In Genesis, it says that God created the heavens and the earth, and he made them out of nothing, ex nihilo. His was the work of ultimate originality, and humans cannot hope to be as close to creativity as God is. We cannot make things by speaking them into existence, and if you can, come find me. But God did just that. Tolkien puts forward this image of subcreation as one of our aspects of expressing how we are made in the image of God. When we act as sub-creators, we are in essence worshiping God, because we are replicating his character of creativity. When we find evidence that an artist has used this creativity in their art, that is something to be praised. So in art, practically, we can look for this through an artist who explores new perspectives, or somebody who uses materials or methods of painting or sculpting that have never been used before. One example of this is in J.M.W. Turner's Rain, Steam, and Speed. I hope you can see that okay. At the time that Turner painted this, everybody around him was painting really realistically. They would have painted buildings and trees, perhaps, where Turner did not. Instead, he painted in this hazy array of colors that is instantly very creative to anybody at that time period who is viewing the piece. It was something completely new. And we can praise that creativity as inherently beautiful because it reflects God's creativity. Besides creativity, creation was also made with a purpose in mind. God created with the end in mind from the beginning. He didn't make anything on a whim. He was very careful in how he made everything that exists today. For instance, when God made the sun and the moon, Genesis says, they were made to signify signs and seasons, and days and years, to separate the light from the darkness, and to give light on the earth. They were not made by accident. In art, sometimes it can be confusing nowadays because people call anything art. People call things art that were not intentionally created. But when we find evidence that an artist did create with deliberateness and purposefulness, that is something beautiful because, again, it reflects God's own purpose that he made the world with. Some practical examples of ways we can look for an artist who made a work purposefully are if they include symbolism, storytelling, or immense detail. Obviously, we can't watch somebody make a piece of art, so it's hard to tell if they made it deliberately or not. But if these three things are included, then it could not have been made simply by accident. Besides creating the world creatively and with a purpose in mind, God made the world so that it had harmony. It had a balance between diversity and unity. For instance, in Genesis, it is described that when God made living things, he made them so that they would fill the earth and that they would be fruitful and multiply. But all of these living things existed on one earth, under one God, and God made that diverse array of life according to its kinds. There was a sort of balance in the ecosystem between diversity and unity. Translated to art, harmony should exist through how the composition is formed and how the colors interact with each other. We can look for harmony in art through those things, and how it reflects the harmony of creation is how we can find beauty in art. Besides creating the world with creativity, purposefulness, and harmony, we should look for the skill of the artist in their piece of artwork. We'll turn to how the tabernacle and the temple display the value of skill in a piece of art. So when the tabernacle was first created, God endowed a man named Bezalel with artistic gifts to make the tabernacle. In Exodus, it says specifically that he had all sorts of artistic gifts, with skill and with knowledge, with hammering in gold and silver and bronze. He had skills for cutting wood and for carving stones. And all of these things show that skill is very much valued in the creation of the tabernacle. In addition, when Moses called on the people of Israel to build the tabernacle, he only called on those people that were skillful to help him. Everybody else in the population was only supposed to donate supplies. Skill is repeated over and over throughout the accounts of the creation of the tabernacle. So it's evident that it's very valued to God in how it was created. And we see the parallel in how the temple was also created. There was a country ruled by King Hiram, and King Hiram's men were better at carving wood than Solomon's own men. So when Solomon needed wood to build the temple, he told King Hiram that he would pay him whatever he wanted to simply have Hiram's men help him build the temple. It's evident that in both of these cases, skilled people were required and valued to build these places of God. But not only were these places built by talented people, they were built in a way that reflected the talent of the artist. For instance, some elements of the tabernacle are extremely detailed. Some of the curtains had cherubim embroidered into them. Some of them had exactly 50 loops of gold detailing around the edges. And my favorite part is the 8-pronged lampstand, the menorah. It had almond blossoms carved into it. It was made completely of gold, and it was made of one single piece of hammered gold. Imagine the talent required to make this 8-pronged lampstand out of one piece of gold. And in addition to add almond blossoms on it, which are very delicate. So it's evident that in art, when we find that it was made by a skillful person in a way that represented their talent, that we can find beauty in that. One work that I like to point to is, not that one. Not that one either. Yes, this one. This is Vortex by Richard Serra, and I'm sure many of you have seen it or even been inside. It's right outside the Modern Art Museum. What I like about this piece that shows skill is that it's made of this thick metal, and metal is something that's strong and durable, yet it appears to be leaning. Like all of the metal pieces are leaning against each other, and it's hard to figure out how it's so supported. The piece seems strong, yet delicate, and it takes a skillful person to accomplish that. And besides that point, it's just a huge sculpture, and not anybody can just go and create something like that. Besides looking for creativity, purposefulness, harmony, and skill in a work of art, we need to most importantly consider the message of the piece. This plays out in 2 different areas. We should consider how clear the message is, and then the content of the message. Paul says in Romans that since the beginning of the world, God's creation has described his invisible qualities, and they have been clearly seen by what he has made. So in art, if God's creation so clearly communicates his qualities, in art we should look for there to be a clear communication of a message as well. Now, this doesn't mean that we should be able to look at a piece of art and instantly discern what it's trying to say. Art should have some proper measure between clearly communicating something and between having enough complex ideas for us to look at a piece of art for a while and continue to discern new meaning. But it should have a message that is able to be discerned, is what I'm trying to say. Once we know what the message is, we should look for it to align with what the Bible says to be true. Ultimately, if the message of a work of art is offensive to God or sinful or corrupting, that piece cannot be called beautiful. I like to think of this, I like to compare this to a song. If we like a song and the beats are harmonious and it was made creatively and all of the other elements check out, but the message is offensive and completely horrible, we can't really call that song ultimately beautiful. Remember that God is beautiful, so whatever we call beautiful, we need to be extremely careful about. But one thing to note is that the message does not necessarily have to be uplifting or religious. A message that is dark or contemplative can also be beautiful. In the Bible, we see examples of both uplifting messages and messages that are hard to deal with, like the crucifixion. So it is appropriate and sometimes for art to deal with these darker, heavier topics as well. Here's Frida Kahlo's The Two Fridas. This is also a work of art that I personally would not want to have hanging in my house. But there's still beauty to be found here. Beauty is not just in the eye of the beholder, because if that was the case, it would be ugly, or at least to me it would be. But there's beauty to be found here. Frida was going through a period of immense emotional and physical pain. Throughout her life, she dealt with several terrible medical issues, so there was physical pain involved, and she painted this right after her divorce with Diego Rivera. So there was clear pain and anguish, and we can see that through her painting. She has a broken heart. Both of these are Frida, by the way. She has a broken heart in the left image, and she is clearly feeling isolated and lonely by the shiftiness of her eyes. The background displays how she is in agony, and just the gloominess and the tone of sadness of the entire painting. We can find beauty in this because at some points it's relatable to how we feel. Obviously we don't have the same medical condition as her, but the vulnerability that she displays and the sorrow that she displays is valuable, and we can empathize with that and find beauty even in a work of art whose message is dark. So art can be confusing, and I know this firsthand. Especially looking at modern art or abstract art, it's often difficult to know where to begin. We often think, I could do that. And I'm going to give you an example of one such piece. It's just a bunch of rectangles, right? Well, yes, but it's much more than that. There's beauty to be found even in a work of art that maybe we could do. This is by Paul Klee. And at first instance, it doesn't look super impressive. But Paul Klee was actually trying to paint music. And that brings up another point. When we view art, we shouldn't just look at it and make an evaluation about it. Sometimes it requires effort to figure out what the importance of the piece is. Just like reading a book or watching a movie, we need to evaluate it and we need to think about it. Some difficult things are worthwhile, and that goes with saying in art as well. So Paul Klee, like I said, he was trying to paint music. Perhaps he turned the dial down on skillfulness, to turn the dial way up on harmony and creativity and purposefulness and message. And you can do that. Maybe it's not skillfully made because any of us can paint rectangles, but his approach to painting music is creative, and not all of us could do that. His way of representing something childlike is also beautiful. It empathizes with us. We all like to be, childhood is usually something that we enjoy reflecting on, and so it's nice that we can empathize with that. So even though art can be confusing, we should still discern what's beautiful in it, because it's a worthwhile thing to find beauty everywhere. So, as Christians, we should thirst for beauty. Since God is beautiful, all beauty should lead us back to God, and like I said earlier, we should be very wary of what we call beautiful. God, through His Word, invites us to find beauty wherever we can, even in a work like The Old Courtesan, that first piece that I showed you. Beauty is not simply in the eye of the beholder. It's something that we need to work at to find in art. And we should look for creativity, purposefulness, and harmony, like God's creation described. We should look for there to be skill in art, like Exodus described when it talked about the tabernacle. And finally, we should consider that art has the beauty in art has a moral aspect as well. Like Paul said when he said, "Beautiful are the feet of him who brings good news." So if we look for these things, we can find beauty in most art. I want to leave you with a bit of relevant wisdom from Paul. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy to be praised, think about these things.